We'll continue today with a final discussion on Śrī Paramatma Sandarbha. A couple final points on the ontology of the Jīva. Then we'll go on to the ontology of Maya. So we left off in our last discussion speaking of the specific characteristics that Śrī Jīva Muni put in his listing of intrinsic characteristics of the Jīva, which were not listed in the Padma Purana intrinsic characteristics or Swarup-lakṣaṇa of the Jīva. Those three specific characteristics that brought Jiva Goswami to choose Jīva Muni's presentation were the fact that the Jiva is endowed with knowership, he is endowed with agency, and he is endowed with experiential capacity. Some Anuchetas bring this out. The 35th Anucheta, Jiva writes there, moreover, by the very same statement, it is further shown that the capacity to know, jnatritva, also belongs even to the pure Atma, by virtue of its being a knower of the presentational field. And this cognitive capacity, being a natural attribute of the eternal self, is also eternal and thus does not undergo modifications. So again, just to remind ourselves, Jiva here is presenting the intrinsic characteristics of the Jiva. Maybe another way to look at it is the intrinsic characteristics of the Atma, meaning that sometimes the terminology Jiva is applied when we speak of the Atma, the pure essence of our being influenced by the Lord's external potency. Sometimes it's referred to as the Jiva when it's under that influence, and referred to as Atma when that essence of ourselves is not under that influence. Just different terminologies that are applied to the nature of our infinitesimal selves. So here, these three things, thinking, feeling, and willing, you could say, are these characteristics that Jiva Goswami wanted to highlight from Jīva Muni's presentation of the Jiva. So here he's written that this capacity to know is there independent of the Jiva being influenced by the Lord's external potency. Because the body is seen to have agency, kartritva, as a result of its relation to the individual conscious being, and because inert objects are also acknowledged as sometimes exhibiting agency due to the presence of the indwelling supreme consciousness in accordance with the statement, without whom nothing is accomplished. It is concluded that agency ensues only from the pure, i.e., only from the individual or from the supreme consciousness. Thus it is said, being infused with whose conscious portion the body, senses, vital force, mind, and intellect perform their respective functions. Again, just to clarify, we're speaking of the fact that this is an intrinsic characteristic of the very nature of our being. We have this ability of agency, and so does the Supreme. And of course, he has his ability. Sometimes his ability of agency comes through his manifestation as Paramatma and gives life to external energy. Finally, we want to discuss this experiential capacity. This is also intrinsic. Next to be considered is experiential capacity, bhoktritva, which is in the form of feeling or affect, samvedana, and which culminates in the Jiva alone, which is conscious by nature. As Bhagavan Kapila says in the 3rd canto, know the Purusha, who is transcendental to Prakriti, to be the cause in experiencing happiness and misery. Here the Purusha that is being referred to is the Jivatma, that infinitesimal particle of the Supreme, this Jiva Shakti. It is actually a Shakti of Paramatma. We are a manifestation of the conscious energy of the Paramatma aspect of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So now we'll go on and discuss just a little bit of the Ontology of Maya, the bahiraṅga-śakti. This is an overview of what's presented in the Paramatma Sandarbha. Jiva Goswami has presented the deepest philosophical concepts, and the Paramatma Sandarbha itself can be seen in that light. It is so comprehensive in bringing to light the nature of the Lord's potencies that we have the most acquaintance with. By seeing how we fit into the total picture of the Supreme and His various energies, and how the environment in which we inhabit fits into the total picture of His various potencies, we become enlivened as devotees to understand how our acharyas allow us entrance into this transcendental knowledge. It's beyond anything that we can come to with all of our intellect and all the intellect of the combination of all humanity for all time. We could not be introduced to this much in-depth understanding of the nature of our being, the nature of our true self, and the nature of our true source. It cannot be comprehended by our mental and intellectual capacity while we are still under the influence of the Lord's external energy. For someone like Jiva to take the Bhagavat Purana and extract from it this essence of transcendental knowledge in such a way that we can begin to comprehend the nature of matter and the nature of the spirit and the nature of our true selves, it enthuses us in our pursuit of transcendental knowledge on two counts. It is itself just this hearing an engagement in bhakti. And second of all, it gives to us in a relatable way these insights that we could not arrive at in any other way, this descending knowledge. And what Jiva's done, he's given us this bhashya, a deep commentary on the Bhagavat Purana. And the Bhagavat Purana, as he's already made clear, is the topmost presentation of spirituality available for us, even superseding the Prasthana Triad that all the other Vaishnava Sampradayas were utilizing up to the time of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's advent. The Bhagavat Purana was there, but it still took the advent of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his direction to the Goswamis to bring out this essence. And in doing so, we have the Sandarbhas of Jiva, wherein Jiva makes clear the Bhagavat Purana. This is the topmost evidence regarding spirituality. And then Jiva presents the Sandarbhas and pulls out from that topmost essence of spiritual reality the deepest of insights into the nature of being. And the Paramatma Sandarbha is so significant in that regard because it acquaints us with the nature of our being that we are most familiar with, our own mind-body complex and the environment that we ourselves inhabit, the material energy. Speaking of the material energy, let's go on. The ontology of Maya, bahiraṅga-śakti, the instrumental, nimitta, and constituent, upadan aspects of Maya. The 48th Anuccheda. Jiva says there, in this way, the intermediary taṭastha potency of Paramatma has been described. The taṭastha-śakti, ourselves, jivatma, in its pure sense, atma. Now we shall discuss the potency known as extrinsic, bahiraṅga. This potency, called Maya, which is operative in the matter of cosmic creation, maintenance, and dissolution, was referred to earlier in terms of its incidental characteristics, taṭastha-lakṣaṇa. It is known as tri-varṇā, or tricolored, signifying that which is constituted of the three guṇas. And then Jiva quotes from the Bhagavad-Gītā, this divine Maya of mind consisting of the guṇas is very difficult to cross. So Jiva is saying, we've already given an overview that Paramatma has these three characteristics and these two primary Shaktis in relationship to the cosmos, the taṭastha-śakti, the jivas, which are conscious, and the māyā-śakti, or the bahiraṅga-śakti. I've already discussed that in brief, the three modes, at the beginning of the work. Now we're going to go on and go into a little more detail. He continues in this Anuccheda, and at this point, I'm drawing from the commentary because, as we've discussed before, these Anucchedas are extremely complex, and therefore I just want to bring out the essence to give you some vision of what Jiva has accomplished here. So it's written in the commentary, Paramatma presides over both the taṭastha and bahiraṅga-śaktis. Having defined the incidental and intrinsic characteristics of the taṭastha-śakti, Śrī Jīva now begins his explanation of the extrinsic energy, or bahiraṅga-śakti, which is the taṭastha-śakti's field of action, kṣetra. This is called prasaṅga-saṅgati, or contextual correlation. The antaraṅga-śakti, which manifests the transcendental abode, associates, and divine play of Bhagavan, was already explained in the Bhagavat Sandarbha. So in the Bhagavat Sandarbha, we were introduced to that personalized aspect of the supreme personality of Godhead, and we were told about his domain, his transcendental, internal abode, associates, and his specific characteristics. Then Jiva went forward and is discussing the Paramatma expansion of Bhagavan, which is the field of activities for the taṭastha-śakti, ourselves. And this terminology, prasaṅga-saṅgati, points to what we just discussed. We can understand this and relate to this as it relates to ourselves and our own experiences. We are aware of ourselves. We know we exist. We are aware of the fact that we have consciousness. We do think, we do feel, we do will. And then all those other intrinsic characteristics may seem a little foreign to us, that we are eternal. We have so many other intrinsic characteristics as a jiva, but these we can directly relate to: thinking, feeling, willing. The others we may need to be schooled in. Never was there a time that we did not exist. Never will there be a time that we don't exist. And so many other intrinsic characteristics of the nature of our being, which are common to both ourselves as conscious entities and that supreme personality of whom we are an infinitesimal Shakti of. Commentary continues. The bahiraṅga potency is known by different names, such as Prakriti, Maya, and Durga. The incidental characteristics, taṭastha-lakṣaṇa, of the bahiraṅga-śakti. Let's not confuse the terminology. Taṭastha-lakṣaṇa here is referring to the characteristics of Maya. Incidental characteristics of Maya refer to its role in the matter of cosmic creation, sustenance, and dissolution. Although these functions are ultimately conducted by Paramatma, who manifests as the three guna avatars, they are executed in a secondary sense by the bahiraṅga-śakti, consisting of the three gunas. We will proceed to what is the primary reason for the manifestation of the bahiraṅga-śakti, the swarup-lakṣaṇa, as Jiva concludes his Paramatma Sandarbha. Here he's just speaking of the incidental characteristics, the cosmic creation. The extrinsic, the commentary continues, energy called Maya has two divisions, namely nimitta and upadana. The three gunas are nimitta, or instrumental cause, and pradana, which transforms as matter, is upadana, or the constituent cause. To explain this, Śrī Jīva refers to Bhagavan Sri Krishna's instructions on Sankhya philosophy to Uddhava. Two aspects of Maya. Maya has both a constituent, a component aspect, matter, in both its subtle and its gross forms, and it has a causal aspect. So we'll go on to understand these two aspects from the explanations given here. Sankhya posits that Prakriti undergoes various stages of modification under the influence of Paramatma's time energy. The material world undergoes cycles of creation and dissolution like day and night. During the creation, jivas perform actions and suffer or enjoy the outcome of their meritorious and unmeritorious deeds. At the time of dissolution, the evolutes of Prakriti merge back into their respective causes and ultimately back into Prakriti, which remains in an inactive state. So now we're getting some hint that there is matter, and matter undergoes transformations. There is a stage of creation, a stage of maintenance, and a stage of dissolution. All this is happening under another influence of the material energy, and here it's pointed out to be the time energy. So that's the nimitta. And the upadana is pradana, and then pradana goes into mahat. Mahat expands further under the influence of the modes of material nature, which are also causal themselves. Therefore, you have the evolutes of matter, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and the subtle evolutes, mind, intelligence, and false ego. We'll continue in the commentary. During this period, the jivas have now we're talking about the dissolution period, when there is no material manifestation of those evolutes of pradana. During this period, the jivas have no physical bodies, and their residual karma, called destiny or daiva, remains with them. This daiva is instrumental in bringing forth corresponding new bodies in the next cycle of creation. Just to imagine what's happening, I like to say, under the hood of material nature, when the Supreme Paramatma wraps up all of the material universes and all the material elements are again dissolved into his being. The jivas also are there. They maintain their individuality, and all of their residual karma, as it's pointed out here, or what's going to come our way, based on our prior activities, that's not forgotten. It's not that in the next creation cycle, all the jivas start out equally with no background. No. Our background is there because our conditioning under the influence of the Lord's external energy is anadi. It's beginningless. So we can't trace out a point when we were not under the influence of activities within the material bahiraṅga-śakti, Maya, and therefore we've always been under the influence of karma. And even when the Lord wraps everything up, there is still the residual karma that's yet to be experienced, both in our meritorious and unmeritorious actions, our good and bad activities. Those results are still waiting for us, but they're not influencing us at the time of complete cosmic dissolution when everything is wrapped up. A verse from the Bhagavatam describes, from the 11th canto, Krishna is instructing Uddhava, when the jivas, along with their destiny and prakriti, are in the dormant state within Paramatma, there are no divisions of seer and seen. This state is described in the Upanishads by statements such as, in the beginning, there was only the Atma. The word Atma here refers to Paramatma, because the individual Atmas are not in a state of action. Continuing and now going to the 3rd canto from the Bhagavatam, prior to the world appearance, there was only the all-pervading complete person Bhagavan, the self of all selves, cited in the present as well as in the previous Anucheta, refers to the period of cosmic dissolution prior to the world's appearance. Because Prakriti and the Purusha are all merged in Paramatma at that time, it is said that he alone exists. His aloneness, Kaivalya, is only in reference to the material creation, which is non-manifest at the time. From the point of view of the eternally self-manifest spiritual domain, however, he is never alone. He is accompanied by all his eternal associates. So even though there is a temporary wrapping up of the material manifestation, there is never a wrapping up of the spiritual manifestation. And therefore, the Supreme Lord always has his eternal abode and associates, and he is always active in that Vaikuntha atmosphere. It is only ourselves who go through this continual cycle of individual samsara and cosmic samsara. Next, we'll read a little something from Anucheta 53. Jiva writes there, and this is a long Anucheta, and we've just taken out a portion, and we've gone to this portion just to highlight these distinctions of the elemental, or upadan, what are the elements of material nature, and the causal elements of material nature, or Maya. So, quoting Jara, fever personified, speaks to Bhagavan about the distinction between the two parts of Maya in the form of upadan, elemental, and nimitta, by describing their different functions. Time, destiny, karma, the jiva, innate disposition, subtle matter, the presentational field, the vital force, the empirical self, Atma, the modification of Prakriti, the body, the continuous flow in the form of seed and sprout, all these constitute your Maya. I take shelter in you, the prohibitor of Maya. Now, Jiva Goswami will look to the commentary of Sridhar Swami, and he says in his Anucheta, Swami comments, again, we cannot overemphasize the significance that Jiva Goswami gives to the Bhagavat commentary of Sridhar Swami. Swami comments, time, kala, is the precipitator. Previous action, karma, is the instrumental cause, nimitta. The same karma, when manifest as on the verge of delivering its fruit, is called daiva, or destiny. Innate disposition, swabhav, is made up of the unconscious impressions left by karma. What is our nature? The jiva is that entity to whom these attributes belong. Matter means the subtle or causal elements. The presentational field, kṣetra, is material nature as a whole, prakriti. The vital force, prana, means sutra, or the first modification of prakriti predominated by rajas. The empiric self, atma, here means ego or I consciousness, ahankar. Here ends Sridhar's comment. Jiva then expands on Sridhar Swami's commentary on the verse spoken by Dwara, explains it further, saying that in this verse, kala, daiva, karma, and swabhava are the nimitta, instrumental part of Maya, or the extrinsic energy, bahiraṅga-śakti. The rest are the upadan part, the constituent ingredients. But the jiva who possesses all these properties is made up of both. A part of the instrumental potency, nimitta shakti, also proceeds correspondingly into the set of constituent ingredients, upadan, such as the I consciousness, ahambhav, of the jiva entering into the element called aham, which characterizes the limitations, upadi, of the jiva. This is the result of avidya, ignorance. The clarification is being made by jiva. Some of these are constituent parts, and some of them are instrumental parts that make up our constitution. We are influenced by both. We certainly can't deny the influence that comes upon us from the material body itself and all of its components. And we certainly can't deny the influence of these other subtle influences, like karma, our destiny, like our innate swabhav, what makes us ourself or gives us our I consciousness, what makes me that race car driver and has made me from the beginning of this lifetime attracted to going fast. Where did that come from? What is that influence? Why wasn't I influenced like someone else whose natural inclination in life from the very beginning, from birth, was to be an intellectual, to study all the different philosophies of the world and become a world-renowned teacher of philosophy in my later life? What pulls us in one direction or another? What influences the pains and pleasures that I experience in my day-to-day existence? Who can deny the overriding influence of time itself as I'm forced to go through both the material changes of the body and the psychological changes that I experience throughout my life? Just to expand a little bit more on these influences and how these influences are predominated by the Lord Shaktis, Jiva takes us a step deeper to point out the following. Bhagavan Sri Krishna speaks of the first two functions of the nimitta part of Maya. O Uddhava, know that knowledge, vidya, and ignorance, avidya, are my two forms, energies created by my Maya, which are beginningless and cause the bondage and release of the embodied beings. Again, Jiva goes to Sridhar Swami, quoting him, "The word forms, tanu, here means potency, shakti, because bondage and liberation are expanded or accomplished by them. They are created or brought about by my Maya, being forms of Maya's functions." It's very interesting in looking to the extensive unpacking of these ideas of vidya and avidya and how they play out in relationship to conditioning and liberation, and are still eternal aspects of the Lord's external potency. All of these aspects of the potency are there, and they themselves are eternal. But we know that knowledge can lead to liberation, which is an end to material existence for the jiva. A little bit more from the Anucheta, Jiva writes, "A doubt is raised. If bondage and liberation are the effects of Maya, then surely they cannot be beginningless and endless, respectively." To this, the verse replies with the word ajay, meaning beginningless. "Therefore, for as long as I inspire ignorance, there is bondage, and when I bestow knowledge, then liberation becomes manifest." Here end Sridhar's comments. Here, beginning forms of Maya's functions means that knowledge and ignorance are factually states of Maya, Maya vritti. By saying that they are created, what is meant is simply that they are manifested by Maya, which has unlimited other functions because they have no beginning. In the same way, the word sporati becomes manifest in Swami's commentary is to be applied only to liberation, because the jiva is liberated by its very own inherent nature. And it is due to ignorance alone that there is but an appearance of bondage. When knowledge arises, the liberated state is simply brought to light. So, the intended sense is that liberation is the jiva's permanent state. So again, now we look more, what is this Maya's influence on the jiva? The jiva, in fact, itself is pure. The jiva is always liberated, but it becomes influenced by the Lord's external potency. But its very essence is to not be influenced, just as the Lord is not influenced. But we are infinitesimal, and therefore we do come under that influence due to false identification. We identify with Maya in a false way, but that isn't the reality of our existence. The Anucheta continues, "Here it should be understood that the aspect of Maya known as vidya is only a gateway to the illumination stemming from the wisdom faculty that is a specific feature of the Swarup Shakti, or the intrinsic potency of Bhagavan. By itself, however, the vidya potency of Maya is incapable of bestowing liberation, even, unfortunately, for the Jivan Mukta. Up to the stage of Jivan Mukta, unless there is a pinch of bhakti, there is no possibility of conquering over material nature simply by knowledge alone. So the yogi and the jnani can go so far, but really the knowledge potency from the Swarup Shakti is the culminating factor of the perfection of their ideal. So it's only when they are so influenced by the Swarup Shakti that they can reach perfection. They must have some influence of the Swarup Shakti, and we know that influence that makes them successful is Bhakti herself. The Bhakti Shakti of the Swarup Shakti makes that perfection possible. Again, going on in the same theme, that aspect of Maya known as avidya in turn has two functions. Jiva says, the potency of concealment and the potency of projection. The first is situated in the jiva alone, covering his inherent consciousness. The other continually causes attachment in the jiva by inciting cognitions that are other than the reality. So the potency to cover us over and the potency of us wanting to be covered over and projecting ourselves through false identity into the material association. Some commentary on this. Maya has two divisions, namely Upadan in the form of Prakriti or Pradhan and Nimitta in the form of the gunas. The Upadan part manifests 24 tattvas. Nimitta has the two divisions, knowledge and ignorance. Avidya has two further divisions. The first of these covers the true nature of the jiva, and the second furnishes it with illusory knowledge. Śrī Jīva makes an important comment about vidya granting liberation. Vidya is a potency of Maya, which truly speaking has no power to grant liberation. This vidya is in fact a doorway to a higher vidya, the specific part of the intrinsic potency that is actually instrumental in revealing the liberated state. Both have the same name, vidya, but are two distinct potencies. Liberation is not possible without the help of the intrinsic potency. We have in the commentary specific references from both the Bhagavad-Gītā and the Srimad Bhagavatam in that regard. We will continue now into another division of the Paramatma Sandarbha. So we've looked at the bahiraṅga-śakti, the māyā-śakti. There is so much more to be discussed there, but this is just an overview. So we'll go to the next section of the Paramatma Sandarbha, wherein Jiva brings out the fact that the universe is a product of Shakti Parinam, not Vivarta. Important point being made here, basically to refute the Advaitin viewpoint that the world is simply false. So it's simply an illusion. This philosophy, Vivarta, that everything is basically just a manifestation ending in illusion, is certainly not the Gaudiya viewpoint and the viewpoint put forth in the Bhagavat Purana or any of the other Vedic scripture. Rather, the universe itself is actually a Shakti of the Paramatma, feature of the Supreme. The world is a parinama of Paramatma Shakti. Anucheta 58. Very long Anucheta. It's subdivided. First part. So, it is to be concluded that Bhagavan's trans-rational power alone is the cause of the appearance of duality. Now, this section of the Paramatma Sandarbha is extremely significant to those wanting to dive deeply into an understanding of Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. Because Jiva here goes to great lengths to point out the nature of this trans-rational power. Because really, this is an amazing thing. This manifestation of material energy from his very being, which is without consciousness and a manifestation from his very being of a conscious potency that can be influenced by his non-conscious potency. Achinta beta beta tattva. How really is that possible? How does it come forth? And Jiva goes to great lengths here in the Paramatma Sandarbha to bring to light the intricacies of our philosophy that distinguishes Gaudiya Vaishnavism, this philosophy of Achinta beta beta tattva. The Lord's external energies are viewed in so many different ways by the various sampradayas. So many presentations have been made regarding the Lord's external energies and the Jivatma by the various acharyas of those sampradayas. There's so many different viewpoints. Advaitavad, Sudha-dvaita, Dvaita-dvaita, and really to go into all those philosophies. And here Jiva goes to great lengths in his Paramatma Sandarbha to fully justify our Gaudiya perspective of a Achinta, a trans-rational understanding, something that is beyond conventional. It doesn't fit between the ears, that the Lord can have inconceivable potencies that are contradictory. How is that possible? This Achinta beta beta tattva and a deep explanation of it really goes a long way to highlighting the depth of understanding of our Gaudiya Sampradaya. So it is to be concluded that Bhagavan's transrational power alone is the cause of the appearance of duality, because there is no duality in transcendence. Therefore, although Paramatma by his very own intrinsic nature is altogether free from change or modification, he transforms into the form of the universe and so on through his transrational power. Just as a philosopher's stone or a Chintamani gem can produce anything desirable, and just as a magnet can move a piece of iron from afar. This has been accepted by Sri Vyasadeva. Brahman is the creator because the Shruti says so. Brahman is understood only through the Vedas. So with that, I will conclude this week's presentation. I will humbly and respectfully thank you for your kind association. And I sincerely hope that this has nourished your spiritual understanding and enthused your practice. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, kripasindubieva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo, Vaishnavijyo namo namaha.